first thing we want to talk about is demographic shifts. So what we're looking at is the aging of the population. 129 countries echo the basic aging of the population, like what's going on in Canada and the U.S. So all the Western democracies are aging. We're all getting slow, stodgy, and getting slower. So that means we're going to have to radically change our attitudes towards legal immigration. Now, this part's my opinion. What I believe is that we're going to have to create, in effect, a funnel for legal immigration. It's a way to actually import a tax base. Like, they're coming here anyway. It's like, why not make them legal citizens? So make the barrier to become a legal citizen easier, but the barrier to actually become an illegal coming into this country much harder. So call that a funnel. And then what ends up happening is we'll know who's coming in and then turn them into taxpayers. So this way, they're not a burden on society, they're actually contributing to society. I think each of the Western democracies are going to actually have to compete for talent, incentivizing people to come to our countries, which is very different than what's going on today. It's a paradigm shift over the conversation about immigration at the moment. So the demographic shifts are a thing. So what you should be looking for is 129 countries in the world getting older. The lead on that is Taiwan. Taiwan has the worst demographics in the world. Second is South Korea. Third would be China. Like, for example, we're going to lose 700 million Chinese people in the next 25 years. So they're going to have their population from 1.4 billion down to 700 million. And there's no way to stop that unless you lower the barriers for immigration. That's not really an Asian cultural thing. So similar thing with Russia. Russia is actually going to have its population in the next 25 years also. So what that does, that kind of tells you what's behind what's happening. What you really want to do in order to understand the future is to bring together different disciplines to make a more cohesive argument. Like, for example, we want to understand demographics. That's first and foremost. Then you really want to understand the science of human nature. Our other videos are all about that. Then what we want to do is be able to source information from places like the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. For example, you have sub-Saharan Africa is likely to have more and more younger people. So what you have is, in some cases, their average age in sub-Saharan countries are 14 to 15 years old and will remain that way in perpetuity. In the case of the old guard countries, like Asia, like China, like Western Europe, Canada, the United States, as opposed to Mexico, these countries are getting old, stodgy, and getting older. So that means the average age is increasing each year. So what they will do is have, let's call it burdens on entitlement programs. When you have more people taking from the system as opposed to giving into the system, it creates an imbalance, likely increasing taxation, or at least a burden on the overall economy. That means you're going to have less and less young people. So we're going to have to import them most likely from sub-Saharan Africa. So a great idea would be is to create, like, let's say a nursing school in Kenya, where what you're doing is training nurses for these other countries. So then you get employment for those people in the, let's call them first world nations, where they can send money back to the third world for the rest of their families. So this can create a really cool dynamic where you're making sure that the younger generation is being productive and incredibly useful to the older generation countries. That's one possibility I see would be a really great business idea. So the other things is that we have to get over the contestation. So we have to get over the fact that, yes, people believe differently. Great works around this would be like Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind. Books around why people are so politically divided. Like, are we genetically programmed to be this way? And it seems like it has a pretty strong argument about that. So what we need to do is recognize it's in the best interest of society to listen to the other side. So not to look at them as they're evil. This goes back to a theme that I've had in my videos before of displaced religiosity. What we need to recognize is as our countries become more and more secular, we're starting to believe that if someone believes differently than me, then that means the other person is evil. This comes from religious thought and non-religious applications. It's a special type of stupid, folks. What we really need to do is recognize that just because the other person believes differently than me does not mean that they're evil. In fact, ancient religions, which I'm studying at the moment for a book that I'm working on about an atheist defense of religion, is ancient religions recognize the battle for good and evil is internal inside each of us. So what we could do is recognize, let's hear the other side. So this way we can cherry pick the brilliance of the doctrine of the right and avoid the stupidity of which. We can cherry pick the brilliance of the left and stay away from its stupidity too, because there's brilliance and stupidity on both sides. I'd like you to actually cherry pick the both for their brilliance. That's called the center. So what we need to do is move back to the center and recognize this contestation starts internally, but it finishes externally. So you're going to see challenges from China and what have you that are going to be challenging the world order because it's not built around what they would prefer. So what we need to do is recognize that the battles that we have internally in the United States, Russia and China are not having pronoun arguments. So they're waiting for us to tear ourselves apart. You could argue that society is committing suicide. So this fragmentation has to end, but I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. The other things that we need to face here is the concept of climate change. So a series of interviews that I recently watched were on something called nano reactors. These are small nuclear reactors that actually might be able to solve our energy crises in the future too. And these reactors are so small that they cannot melt down. So this is something I think that could actually deserves our attention to be listened to again, especially as the baby boom generation starts to die off. My generation didn't spend, I'm Gen X, my generation didn't spend time underneath our desks afraid of nuclear war. We kind of stopped doing that by the time I hit school age. So my generation does not fear nuclear weapons and nuclear reactors the way the baby boom generation does. So we can move the needle in a positive direction on each of these things, but we have to get past our inherent likelihood to form tribalism and identity politics. So if you understand that politics makes us stupid, and what Philip Tetlock talks about how you're either in investigation mode or prosecution mode. You cannot be in both simultaneously. So for this video, what we talked about were the 5 themes throughout the report. What we're going to do is go into greater detail on each one of them with the next ones. So stay tuned.